here's what I know. Someone's going to have to start to fight for Nebraska. All right, so I'm here to fight for Nebraska. And finally, the team grows up. It's what people always ask me about year 3. Finally, the team grows up, and they're like, well, I got to go make the play.
It's time to join the Husker Huddle with Nick Handley and Grant Hansen.
It is that time. It is our 3rd episode here of the Husker Huddle. Nick Handley and Grant Hansen, really appreciate you making us part of your Husker content viewing and listening pleasure, because we've got a lot to get to today. But first, make sure if you are just checking this out for the first time, be sure to like and subscribe to our Performance Podcast page on YouTube. And of course, you can listen anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple and Spotify, the main ones right there. And don't forget, now we have a new feature. We're going to roll it out today. It is the initial mailbag. And we got some good emails, some good questions.
Got good questions from people.
Yes.
How about that?
We know you all have questions, but you're also going to ask very intelligent questions too.
And they did. You did.
Yes.
But if you want to be a part of the mailbag for next week's episode, you just have to email us. It is Husker Huddle, of course, all one word there, at myboomerradio.com. Husker Huddle at myboomerradio.com. That's how you can be a part of the mailbag. If you have any other thoughts apart from the mailbag, you can email them there too. Perhaps you want to yell at us. That could be fun.
So season hasn't started yet. We can't do that.
That is true. Yeah. Also, rate us, review us on YouTube. And if you can do it in the comments, Spotify, Apple, that helps us out. So if you can give us a 5-star review there, we would greatly appreciate it.
This was an interesting conversation we had before we came on, and we're going to be talking to Jessica Coody of the Huskers Radio Network on today's show, get her thoughts not only on football, but also a little volleyball, as they are going to be starting their season just a little bit earlier than football too. So we're going to get into that, and a great conversation that you had with Archie Wilson, who has been essentially all of the talk. I cannot remember when a punter has been this popular.
I'm telling you what, I can't remember, and I guess my memory goes back. Haha. Not as long as yours. Thank you. Nick's old. No, I can't remember when a player has generated this much buzz in fall camp.
Yeah, it's
in this short amount of time.
Yeah.
And when you listen to him, and we'll play this interview later in the show after the mailbag, but when you listen to him and you listen to my conversation with him, if you meet him, you understand why almost immediately.
Yeah.
This guy is basically impossible not to like. And it's funny too, we talk about this, there's an there's a large number of those guys that fit in that category this year. Like I would throw Luke Lindenmeyer in that category. Yeah. Javen Wright certainly falls in that category. There's a lot of good stories on this year's team, from the coaching staff down through the players.
Right.
And so it's exciting. It's exciting. Like, this is dog days of fall camp, in that there's generally not a lot of good news that can come out of this period of time. It's either somebody got hurt, somebody threw a brick through a vape shop window, something like that. But, I do think this week provided something that was different than your normal week 2 or week 3 of fall camp, with Archie's comments and some of the other things that we saw from Mike Eckler and others that we'll discuss today.
Yeah, and that's not to say that there has not been a punter as far as their skill set that's been popular. Obviously, the late great Sam Foltz, you go all the way back to Darren Erstad as a two-way baseball stud, but also a punting stud too. But as far as just the personality, you forget this kid is 18 years old.
He's 19 now.
Oh,
he's 19.
He just turned 19. Just turned 19.
This week.
And he is away from his family for the first time. We saw a lot of that from the actual press conference, went viral. In fact, Jenna Hager-Bush on NBC on not Good Morning America, but what's the other one? The morning show. I don't know, whatever.
I don't watch it. I don't watch it on a network TV, clearly.
But that clip was featured but it wasn't featured in a ha-ha moment. It was featured in a, oh my gosh.
Look how cool this is.
Yes,
basically.
this is raw emotion.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, not awesome that he's crying, but yeah. And Archie, it's funny because I think at the end of that interview with Archie, I was like, well, and the whole state knows about your you singing Piano Man and all that. It's like, well, actually now it's pretty much the whole country knows about you generally, which has got to be such a crazy feeling for him. But again, it's very easy to see why once you get to know him and talk to him at all.
Yeah, we're going to play that a little bit later on in the show. The Today Show, by the way. That's what it's called, that morning show. Anyway,
there it is.
I knew it'd come to me. See, I'm old. This is what happens. I have a delayed fuse sometimes. But
get to the weekly sound.
The weekly sound is now.
Guys can be a damn weapon. And you got to understand this. In punting, special teams in general, every punt he hits isn't going to be a 55, 60-yarder. He'll miss hit one. That's going to happen. And when it does, I'll take it. All right, but I'm telling you, when you look up at the end of the year with his body of work, you're going to go, holy cow, this guy is the real deal.
I thought we were really, 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 really efficient on offense. I thought that we were able to both run the ball and throw the ball. The one caveat to that is that when the quarterback's not live, sometimes guys are blitzing and running by, and I'm saying stay off them. So
I've never been demanded of so much effort from a coach before. I already have D, Coach Shorts, so he already demands so much, but when there's two people demanding the most out of you because they know what you can do and they know what you can be in the future, why would you want it any other way?
Well, they're all going to be, but most of them will probably be coordinators or head coaches. They're really quality people and coaches. But, I grew up where the older coaches mentored the younger coaches. And I think there's a lot of coaches today that don't do that anymore. And I think it's my job to do that. Whatever I've learned over the years that I see can make them better as a teacher, I think it's my obligation to help them. And so the older coaches helped me when I was that age, and I should do the same for them. So those are the types of things I try to do with the younger coaches.
It comes back to our head ball coach. Think about if I was in a dark alley, okay, and there's 4 guys coming at me, I could pick one head ball coach to be with me. It'd be our guy. I'd say, Coach Rule, you got those 3, I got that one. We'd be just fine.
A lot to chop up there. And as we talked about, this is an interesting time right now because you're going through the dog days of fall camp, but there is light at the end of the tunnel because basically a week from now, fall camp will have adjourned and you're in game week. So we're really close. But I want to start with hearing 2 guys in particular speak just a couple of days ago on Tuesday's media availability and open practice session. Hearing Phil Snow and Mike Eckler, you talk about, I know everybody likes to talk about, the big energy, whether it's Big Phil energy or Big Eck energy, but those 2 both going back to back at the podium, there are just certain personalities, I think, and there's a question later on in the mailbag about Eckler's personality and his just overall presence and how that can impact and change special teams that we'll get into later. But when you think about what makes a coach easy to play for, but also to be able to connect with certain types of coaches, I think a lot of that energy that they bring, but is authentic. I think there's that difference between fake energy and then there's the authentic energy. And I think both Phil Snow, who's been around the game for a very long time, longer than Mike Eckler, but has seen it in varying perspectives, has been as a coordinator at the NFL, has been at the college game, but has also seen in different positions. And in this role where he's essentially not only a mentor to all of the players, but to coaches. We heard Rob Dvorak talk about that not too long ago. Just hearing what his role is, but overall, his energy and enthusiasm and the knowledge that he brought. I know it was a quick podium session to hear Phil Snow in the middle of camp. It was hard not to be impressed with just the way that he exudes confidence in what this team, but also his knowledge of the game.
Yeah, I think it was really good just to hear him clarify what exactly his job is. And it's not like people thought he wasn't doing anything or not being impactful. He's the associate head coach. He's been with Matt Rule for dang near 20 plus years. But I think it was good just to hear, okay, he's working with the DBs. He's doing some extra work with the DBs. And then he's teaching all of these younger coaches on the Nebraska's defensive side of the ball. And I think it's always sort of skewed young for Matt Rule on that side, really, since he's been here. But bringing those guys up, and again, to hear him say, these are all incredibly intelligent men who will either end up being head coaches or defensive coordinators someday. So, I'm if you listen to the rest of the press conference too, you can feel all the knowledge that's basically oozing off of him. And so for Nebraska to have that on the coaching staff, and you think about the changes too to coaching rules where you can have, I mean, there's no limits now on the amount of coaches that you can have. You know, I wonder too, right? Like, I mean, is there a room for a Phil Snow on this sort of staff 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Or at least to be as involved as he is. And I'm interested to see how that plays out this year.
Matt Rule also talking about Saturday's scrimmage that was closed, so there was no fans and heck, even people very close to the program. This thing was as tight-lipped as possible, but of course, Matt Rule, as you heard there, giving a little bit of his takeaways, especially with the offense. The one thing I did find interesting about this now, he did bring up the caveat of the quarterbacks weren't going live. They had the green jerseys on, so they're not getting hit. That can make things a little bit easier, maybe a little less hectic. But when you start using the word efficiency with the offense, when we think about the inconsistencies of this offense a year ago, especially as you got into plus territory, even in the red zone, where that efficiency wasn't nearly what it needed to be. Good sign. Again, you take it for what it is, but good to see a quarterback in his sophomore year that is going to be the culprit of all of that, whether this thing is efficient or not. Good to hear that efficiency and guys like Dylan, even TJ Lateef, not getting actually hit. There was no live session with that, but still being able to manage and operate the offense.
Right. It's just like the other thing I thought that was fascinating was circling the wagons around the running backs. Like Matt Rule made a very, very dedicated point to doing that. That's the back half of that answer too. Before he specifically talks about running backs and starts mentioning names, he starts talking about the defense. Hey, we need to shore up our tackling. We have a bunch of running backs that are really, really hard to tackle. And then he does give a full answer later about that and says some great things about Mekhi Nelson, among others. So that's another interesting piece of that he felt the need to go directly out there and say, look, I think we're really actually way deeper than anybody thinks out there. Now, I think he's going to have a hard time bringing people into that camp with him until they actually see game results. But I thought that was fascinating that he felt the need to do that, and at least feels like he's got enough evidence from what he's seen in behind closed doors in practice that he can actually feel comfortable saying that, right? Like even if he's embellishing a little, you got to have something to be able to back that up. You can't just go off and say that without having any evidence at all. So
we all laughed about, there was a lot of moments, and I don't want to say like Mike Eckler's podium session was a comic relief. Just Mike Eckler brings a very unique energy, but when he talked about the alley, there's four guys, and you're going to pick any coach in the country to be by your side. He would pick Matt Rule. Matt, you go get three and I'll take one.
Right.
I feel like if you asked Matt Rule that, he would reverse that. I would think Mike Eckler would probably take three or three and a half.
I'll be honest. I think if I was in that situation and I was just picking how I was going to distribute the three or the four guys between Matt Rule and Mike Eckler, I think I would actually probably give the three to Mike Eckler.
I think Rule's a scrapper.
Well, yeah,
I think he's scrappy.
I mean, David City people are tough too.
That's very, very true. And
people forget
when Mike Eckler speaks, he commands a room for sure. But
oh my gosh,
it's kind of a running theme this week, not just with us here on the Husker Huddle, but also through local media. The Archie Wilson part of this is important because we know how important special teams is. We've talked about that. I mean, here we are in our third episode, and I think each episode we've talked about special teams having to be better. Mike Eckler's brought in for a reason.
At least it's worth 2 wins. I mean, you can point back to games that, okay, well, here's one. Iowa last year, Illinois last year, just to name two off the top of my head. You think back to year one of Matt Rule, Maryland, you could have used, and there were, not to say there were no special teams plays because there were blocked field goals and those sorts of things. Yeah. But like there are games where Nebraska did not have the consistency it needed at the kicker position to be able to feel comfortable kicking, maybe even a 40-yarder or a 45-yarder. You left points out there on the board. There are obviously extremes like the Michigan State game in 2021, but there have been at least 2 to 3 games year to year that you could point to and said, if Nebraska was better in the special teams department, maybe that flips from an L to a W.
Think about the punt block problem that Nebraska had first couple of years.
Oh my gosh.
And not to throw Ed Foley under the bus, but I know a lot of the angst was towards, Ed Foley's your special teams coordinator. This continues to happen. This is where I throw in that he can be a damn weapon type part, because Archie Wilson, this is where we think about that rugby style kicker, punter, and Matt Rule talked about this on several occasions of you're kind of a moving target. And so if you do have some type of that punt protection breakdown, you still have an athlete that's able to scan the field and still get a kick off, or dare I even say, try to cover ground with his own legs or arm. And the fact that he can kick with both feet, that's new to me.
That adds another layer for sure. And Mike Eckler said, without naming Tennessee, this is the guy I was going to take next there. So I think that is a ringing endorsement. And then you add on top of that the Pro Kick School, where Archie Wilson is from in Australia, that has produced 14 last year. 14 of the last 6 of the 16 punters in the SEC were Pro Kick punters, which is crazy. But I mean, that was a stat that Mike Eckler shared. I think that is, we talked a lot about the punter, but there have been a lot of ringing endorsements for Archie Wilson, and now you just got to go out there and see what happens in the game. Hopefully, I saw someone joke somewhere that Nebraska should rush to go 3 and out as quick as possible Cincinnati, just so that Archie could come out there and see what. Yeah, I think Robin Washut said that.
Will the crowd do the da 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 da?
I know. Yeah. Do we have Archie? I mean, will there be Archie chance? Will there be Archie chance?
For his sake, when he comes on the field, great. But let's just hope he's not on the field.
The student section will be very familiar with him by the time they get to the Akron game to be able to pump him up when he comes out there. So,
man, I hope not. I hope he hasn't punted a lot.
Against Akron.
That's the thing. We're like, we want to see this kid out there, but do we really want to see him out there?
Not really.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Dane Key also, one of the first single digits. So congrats to he and Riley Van Poppel. Riley Van Poppel wearing number 5. Dane Key getting his old Kentucky number back at number 6. But as we know, the single digit part of this too. But
had to earn it.
Absolutely had to earn it. Dane Key, though, his importance of not only this receiving room, but also the conversation I had with him that we'll play later on down the line, and you can get it on our social media
Facebook page,
Facebook page, with our All Access. He answered as simple as, "Hey, why'd you come to Nebraska? Out of all the schools, highly decorated wide receiver out of the SEC in Kentucky, why Nebraska?" And it was simple, Dylan Raiola.
Didn't even think. I mean, he said it right away. You can go to Husker Radio on Boomer on Facebook, by the way. That's where you find that, along with a bunch of other Husker content that we'll be producing there throughout the year. But right away, first thing that came to mind, did not have to think about it, really didn't even need to expound on it much beyond Dylan Raiola. He was waiting
for the question he was going to answer with authority.
Yeah, well, and he did. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the offense and the efficiency. Yes, it should be efficient. It has to be efficient. If there is one side of the ball that people probably feel the most confident now about, is probably the offensive side of the ball. You need to have Dylan take that next step forward. You need to see easy to see progress with now, a full year, a full offseason with Dana Holgerson, the experience you have on the offensive line, Emmett Johnson in the backfield, the receivers, Luke Lindenmeyer at tight end, Heinrich Harburg. There's all these pieces there. The offense has to lead the way for this team, which is going to be a flip from a year ago.
Practice takeaways. You and I had a chance to be out there on Tuesday to see a portion of practice, as did the local media. Look, I know I know you get asked this. I get asked this a lot too. Of okay, so what do you think? How we looking?
Sure.
First of all, how we look? I try not to use "we" as much. It's so hard to ascertain much.
Pretty much impossible.
We know that. And now we're at that point of camp that when we're seeing certain things in camp, it's by design. We're not seeing good on good, 11 on 11. We're not seeing that. If you went to the open practice, good for you, then you got to see that. But what we did see, these are a couple of things that I wrote down that I took away. It may not mean anything, but for the second straight time of open practice, I can't take my eyes off. It's starting to sound like a song. Can't take my eyes off you. I'm still very, very intrigued by Williams Nwaneri because of his size.
Sure.
You and I were driving back from Lincoln, and I said, there is just from a physical standpoint, the way that he is built and his initial twitch off the ball, there is a Randy Gregory element to him.
Mm-hmm.
If he comes around and he gets into that fully mature college football player that he was recruited to be, gosh, I still think that there is something that could be very special about him, but you're not hearing a lot of chatter about him. You're not hearing this guy needs to be that type of player right now for this defense to be what it could potentially be. And maybe that's a good thing for him. And so I continue to watch him just in one-on-ones and drills. His size is impressive. How quick he initially is off the ball is impressive. I don't know if I'm worried that we're not hearing more about him, because when John Butler was asked about him, John Butler just kind of stared at the reporter who said, he's going to play.
Yeah.
So, he's
much
part
like
of the
Dane
plans.
Key, like there was no thinking.
Yeah, he's part of the plans, but at what level? That's where I am, but I continue to gravitate to watching the Lenharts, but also watching some of the edge guys, especially when Airy, because he stands out.
And is that a card that Matt Rule wants to keep hidden in the deck until Cincinnati? I mean, that's possible.
I don't know.
You know, again, it's rare that we see a lot of the new guys, especially younger new guys, speaking a lot in this fall camp stuff, and that shifts our perception and our conversation about this, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it's really tough right now, especially in those fall camp open practices, to glean anything that's super important. Give you a caveat, though. Watching offensive line drills on the way out, left to right along the line. Pritchett at left tackle, Latofsky. Center was Justin Evans. Right guard was Rocco Spindler. Right tackle, Teddy Prohaska. So, again, that's one drill. It's 5 seconds, so you got to put a pretty big caveat on it. But that was what some of the offensive line drills were looking like. So, and we'll talk more about Teddy, I'm sure, later. Jessica on deck.
Well, of course, you hear her everywhere on the Huskers radio network, whether we're talking football as a sideline reporter, pregame, postgame, throughout the season, during Sports Nightly as the co-host of Sports Nightly. And I'm happy to say was my co-host, because I was a temporary co-host on Sports Nightly, but very happy to be on the show with Jessica Coody of the Huskers Radio Network. And Jess, it was funny. We were all just talking about this before you came on. We are, yes, in week 3, but we're already starting to see the light at the end of that fall camp tunnel. I mean, it is getting here.
Yeah, I'm so over talking season. The guys start talking about they're sick of hitting each other, want to hit somebody else. I'm ready to not talk about, who's going to start where and what does the offensive line look like. And let's get a game so we can talk about a game and not talk about Paul Feinbaum talking mess on the Big Ten and the preseason list, all that. I'm over it. Let's kick this thing off already.
Well, Jessica, I think this is a great time for me to ask you about the offensive line. So I'm curious your thoughts. I think of the intrigue that exists still in fall camp, I think that tackle position, and maybe both tackle positions, might be one of the better remaining storylines. I think you can make a pretty good argument for all 4 or 5 guys that are in contention for those tackle spots, but who do you think is the most underestimated right now when it comes to winning those 2 jobs?
You know, I think it's a good problem to have, and a problem that this football team hasn't had in a while, right? I mean, it's finally the depth that just takes so long to build. And so you not only have multiple guys that you feel good at backing up the guys on the inside, but whoever does not win, the tackle spots, then you feel really good, which, as we've seen in the past, unfortunately has happened every year, that you've had to have at least 1 backup tackle, sometimes 2 and sometimes 3. So, the fact that it's still a battle with multiple guys makes you feel really good about, if the need comes, that you do need somebody else, that this is a guy that's got a lot of reps throughout fall camp. So, Jeremiah Searles came to practice the other day, and I always love picking his brain about the offensive line. And, he talked about just, it's so different when you get the 1 reps as opposed to the 2 reps. And so here, there's a lot of guys that, because they're battling out, have gotten a lot of those 1 reps. So will only bode well for when those guys, if their number is called upon at any given point. I think it's pretty fascinating. We've heard Coach Rule talk a lot about the battle between Elijah Pritchett and Gunnar Gatula. And we assume that, whoever that if it was Pritchett that Gunner would back him up, but it sounds like if Gunner is the best tackle that they'll move him over to the right side. I think Gunner proved what he could do last year and has fought really hard in fall camp. And obviously Teddy Prohaska coming back, and they've really liked what they've seen out of him. Another guy that's got a lot of experience. Tyler Canuck has been a guy that's battled as well. And then, Turner Corcoran is finally getting to where he's getting to go full speed. He was in a different colored jersey the first, week or so of practice. And then, he's just now getting back into it. But I think the more that he works at it, there's another guy that's got a lot of experience and that also is pretty good on the interior as well. He's a guy that you can plug in a lot of different places. So I didn't really answer your question. I don't know who it's going to be. I think they feel really, really good about whoever it is. But I wouldn't be surprised if after hearing what Coach Rule said on was it Saturday, that if Elijah Pritchett is that guy at right, that maybe Gunnar Gatula moves over there to left, and or vice versa. I guess if Elijah wins the job at left, I know he's playing right at Alabama, but if he wins that job at left, if Gunnar Gatula moves over to the right, I wouldn't be surprised if those were your two starting tackles.
Jessica, I want to take a quick detour over to the volleyball side of things with the red-white scrimmage this past weekend. Who stood out to you among the newcomers? Who do you think was, or maybe more than one player who would have been pretty impressive to you?
T. Sigler was, has been advertised, the number one recruit in the nation, and got a chance to chat with her over the summer as a part of our newcomer series, and she is just so impressive. She's a great interview, and she's someone that you saw. I feel like, and again, I'm no volleyball expert, but after having several conversations, and I just talked to Lauren Cook West, who's going to be on Sports Nightly with us, but just, sometimes I feel like maybe freshmen don't do all the things they have to learn, how to be good passers, or, the things that outside of just getting kills, right? Sometimes that's a work in progress for some of those young players, but we saw her diving for balls, keeping rallies alive. Some of the things that she did outside of just getting kills. And so I think she's going to make a big case for playing time on the outside hitter that plays next to Harper. I think Harper's pretty much locked it up, but I think Treya Sigler, the middles were great, but I don't think that with them being freshman middles, that's the one position that's pretty much it's locked up with Rebecca Alec and Andy Jackson, and so but they were impressive. So I think probably I'd point to T. Sigler and probably those freshman middles, but I think T. Sigler is gonna be out there. I think she's gonna play a role this year.
Jessica Coody is our guest from Huskers Radio Network here on the Husker Huddle podcast. I want to draw the parallel between what we were just talking about, the offensive line, and something that was really on display in that red-white scrimmage with the volleyball team too. And when we think of the success, or at least the potential of success for these two teams this season, a lot of it comes with that depth factor. We talked about it with the offensive line, finally having some depth pieces. But based on everything that I heard and the takeaways that came out on Saturday, you mentioned some of the players right there, but it seemed like the depth also really stood out with this Danny Busboom Kelly team.
Yeah, and Danny said it after the press conference that she wished she had more clear answers, but there were good things from all those athletes that are competing in those battles. I think, going back to the last question about what was impressive about Mania Obeche and Kenna Cogill is that was their first time. They were not here in the spring. So that was their first time in the fire of the Devaney Center, and the way that they were able to have that kind of composure speaks volumes. But, I think there's still a lot to figure out. And just talking with Lauren, she mentioned that what we see in opening weekend very well might not be what we see a month into the season. It could change. And depending on who works best together, the chemistry, she had talked about with the right sides, it's so different setting a lefty or a righty, which is what you got in the battle at the right side. And so, sometimes that which setter has the best chemistry. So, the setter is a big factor, big competition. So I think there's still a lot to figure out. And I don't even think once we see that starting lineup for come a week from Friday, if that will even be the starting lineup that we see in the NCAA tournament in December. I think there might be a lot of changes. They might even experiment. Lauren even talked about maybe, I know this has been a hot topic too, maybe running a 6-2 with the two setters that you have with Bergen and Campbell Flynn. And she said she doesn't think it will be something that they do very often, but could be a wrinkle that they throw in just with how good both the setters are. So I think when you have that kind of depth and talent, who knows? I think they're going to be able to maybe make some adjustments in lineups for what the matchup looks like. Who's better in a matchup, right? And who might have more success against a certain team than others. Last year, they had such a good grasp on, you had some talented players on the, that were not seeing a lot of playing time that would have been starters or stars anywhere else. But they really embraced the mentality, and I forgot how many, was it 13 strong, that everybody had a role. And whether you came in at any given time, whether you didn't play at all, that, everybody played a factor and played a role in the team's success. Now with even more players and even more competition and even more depth, I think that's going to be a big key, is getting players to buy into that when, of course, you want to play. They're competitors. They want to be out there. But, getting players to buy into, hey, that's not my role today. My role is not to play all the minutes, or to get all the opportunities. My role is to be over here and be a great teammate today, and so I think that's going to be, which they've always done such a great job with that. And, and this is a hungry bunch that has been, we heard Rebecca Alex say it at Big Ten Media Days. It haunts her that they've not won a national title. So I do think with the amount of players in that locker room that ultimately they want to win a national title, I think they'll sacrifice themselves for the sake of the team. But that's going to be a big factor, I think, is how you keep everybody happy when there's just only so much playing time to go around with so many good players. It's a good problem. Again, a good problem to have, but I'm glad I'm not on that coaching staff making those decisions.
Back to football here for a second, Jessica. I think when you look at Dylan Raiola, he's obviously a linchpin for this year's team. But if you had to pick a couple players, maybe one or two, that could be linchpins that are not named Dylan Raiola for the 2025 Huskers, who would you go with and why?
Well, I think you got to point towards Emmett Johnson, he's the guy with experience. He's the clear number one. And I think we heard Coach Rule, and we've seen some flashes from some of those other guys are just pretty young and don't have the same kind of experience that Emmett Johnson does. So he's going to be, and they're going to need multiple guys, but I think Emmett's going to be really, really big. I think on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, you obviously point towards like a Riley Van Poppel or an Elijah Judy who have been here that have also kind of are expecting to take a bigger step. I think they're going to rotate a lot of guys on the defensive line. So there's going to be a number of guys that, are contributing there. The guys on the back end, like a Marquise Buford, has just been so big in terms of just his leadership and his vocal, calling guys out when they need to be called out, challenging guys when they need to be challenged, picking guys up when they need to be picked up. So, I think there's several, but, Justin Evans is another guy taking over center that he's going to be running the show up there for that offensive line. And, how he steps into that role is going to be big. And just he's that quarterback there up front. So, I think maybe even like a Luke Lindenmeyer is going to play a big role as well and do a lot of different things for this football team. So I guess I gave you multiple guys there, but, maybe off the beaten path for a couple of them, maybe some obvious ones there too.
I'm going to throw in another guy because what I wanted to get to, and you and I had this conversation, I think it was a question that somebody had brought up on Sports Nightly about, is it more important to get the takeaways as opposed to securing the football, protecting the football, keeping the turnovers down. And you and I both, we kind of disagreed on what we thought was more important on that.
For the sake of the radio show. So we don't agree on everything.
That's right. We don't have to either, right?
I hate when everybody agrees. I like to mix it up.
No, and I think both points were valid. I know how I feel about the defensive side being able to make more plays, but also the importance of not turning the football over. And you felt strongly about how taking the ball away can be a game changer, which I think there's a lot of value to that. And with that being said, I want to bring up, if this defense is going to be that playmaking defense that obviously John Butler wants to see, but Matt Rule's talked about a lot in the offseason. One player I don't think any of us are talking about enough in spearheading that type of effort, making that happen. When we think about experience and we think about playmaking ability, and I'm going to throw this other part out.
Sear, right?
No. A guy who's actually going to be in full preparation leading up to every game. And he did play in the secondary. Now he's as a linebacker. And Javen Wright. Can Javen be the guy that emerges into that? Not only a guy that can cover, but is going to stick in the run game, but also has that ability to be a playmaker. He can be a ball hawk as well. Could that be one of those guys that if this happens with this defense, taking the ball away, making plays, that he's leading that charge?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him. He's done it, right? I mean, he's even the limited time that he's had, what was a couple years ago when he came back, he forced a fumble and the sideline went nuts. And then he's been a guy that he's all over. He is a ball hawk and he is just a tough matchup. And as Coach Rule has called him a cheat code, but he's so smart and understands just because he's been around and what they're wanting to do. And he can match up with guys that maybe certain linebackers can't. And he does have that ability to take the ball away, being his, experience as a defensive back. But yeah, I mean, I think again, it's maybe a little bit different. I think they're probably going to rotate guys there at inside linebacker. So, there's, I think he's definitely going to be a big role, but I think you're going to see multiple guys in that role. And that's one of the things that I am most intrigued by, just because going back to what I haven't seen a lot of practices here in the fall, just a few, but just what I saw in the spring, and then just what you can gather from having conversations with these guys. They want to utilize all the different kinds of weapons that they have. And so, as opposed to maybe just, hey, here's your starting 11, and these are the guys that are going to play all the snaps. And, the last couple of years, we've seen maybe more so the D-line rotate, but you've seen the same linebackers and you've seen the same, defensive backs. I think you're going to see more of a rotation at all three spots on the defense. I think you're going to see a lot of different guys thrown in there, and it's been a big emphasis to make plays. And so I've seen Sierra Wright, he's carried over what he did in the fall. I've seen him make several plays throughout fall camp.
That's a good call, by the way. The Sierra Wright one is a good call, but I wanted to go with Javen there too.
Yeah, he just seems that it's all he does is get interceptions. It seems like Sierra Wright, but he's continued that over. He's made multiple big plays like that in fall camp too, and apparently Andrew Marshall is a dude too. So hopefully multiple guys are getting in on that, and they can get some takeaways at everywhere. Force fumbles, get some picks, all of that. So I know it's they talk a lot about it. It's they know that they've got to be better in that area.
Jessica Coody of the Huskers Radio Network, we appreciate the time. Man, we're almost here. I mean, we got AVCA Showcase coming up. Football's right around the corner. We're Aer Lingus is in 8 days, roughly, from when we release this. So it's about time to get busy.
Yeah, it's here, and I'm ready for it. I'm ready. I'm done with talking season, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm glad that it's finally here, and excited for a good season. I think you're going to see an improved football team, and I can't wait to see them kick it off and see how everything kind of comes together come Thursday night in Kansas City. So thanks for having me on, guys. It went fast. I was like, wait, we're already done?
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it.
All right. See you guys.
Good stuff from Jessica Coody with the Huskers Radio Network as they're ramping up everything as well. Also, be sure to catch all of the games on Boomer Radio.
Oh, yeah.
From pregame to postgame, the entire game, 1490, 97.3, and also on 660 KCRO is your new home for Husker sports. I want to make sure we mention that, where you can hear Jessica and the entire crew on your game day coverage. All right, it is time for our first ever mailbag. And again, if you didn't get in this week, go shoot us an email now. I know you're thinking of stuff right now. As we're talking, you're thinking of things.
Yes.
Let it marinate, but make sure you send us an email, huskerhuddle@myboomerradio.com.
And get them in by Tuesday.
Yes.
Get them in by Tuesday so we can
want to give them some thought.
Fully make it a part of the show. And we can ruminate on those for a little bit. But Huddle at myboomerradio.com. That's where you go.
Some really good ones. I want to start with Jimmy. Jimmy has a few questions. Says, first, running back in the game after EJ on the 28th versus Cincinnati. So who is essentially going to be number 2?
Yep.
What sort of improvements can we expect on special teams? How is Eckler's approach different? And also his last question, based on athletic director comments regarding an emphasis on NIL return on investment, how will this affect Rule's approach to the portal? With limited funds, you have to be very selective on portal investments to avoid spending a large amount on a guy that never sees meaningful snaps. Great questions, Jimmy. We'll start off from the top. Running back in after Emmett Johnson is?
Mekhi Nelson. I don't think it's particularly close at this point. We've all got a pretty good feel of who that's going to be just based off of the comments that are made about him. Well, actually, I think we'll hear from his position coach, Coach Barthel, later on. Is it Friday, as in day of release of this episode?
Yeah.
So we'll be hearing from him today. But I think that's pretty cut and dry at this point in time, barring anything crazy happening between now and then.
Yeah, the Quentin Ives injury is obviously problematic for him. He lost a lot of reps. I don't know if Quentin Ives is a guy that I think he'll factor in at some point, but this is where I think maybe the better question, at least in my opinion, is who's going to be the guy behind Mekhi Nelson? Are you going to see Quentin Ives at a limited capacity, or is it Connor Booth or Isaiah Mosey, situational type of guy?
Sure.
So,
or don't forget Vince Denetone as well. And
yes,
as a guy,
maybe a short yardage guy.
Short yardage. He's got a lot of speed too. And then maybe in pass pro, maybe he's better than some of his other partners in that room.
I thought you were going to say Heinrich Harburg.
No,
because he does a lot of stuff, The improvements that we can expect on special teams and how is Eckler's approach different? I want to answer the second part of that question. His approach, did you guys hear him on Tuesday?
Yeah.
His approach is a lot
It's intense.
But it's infectious. We talked about the Mike Eckler hire. That maybe being the first thing is that energy that is extremely contagious. It makes wanting to play special teams kind of cool, if you will.
Sure.
There was an interesting little soundbite that both Phil Snow and then Mike Eckler talked about of X got 2 offices on the 3rd floor and then also on the weight room floor, right by the weight room. And his answer on why he has that, simply put, because that's where all of the players are, and all the players might have to play special teams at some point. So he wants to be where everyone is. I just think he is so ingrained in the mix with these guys because of that energy, that authentic energy we talked about earlier. Yep. I think that's where I see his approach being different.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's intense. He's very detail oriented.
Yes, that's a good way to put it too. Yeah.
Not to say that Ed Foley wasn't, but I think across the board you're going to see improvement, and that's because of some of the guys that he's brought in. Yeah. Of course, Archie Wilson, probably the foremost among those at this point in time. We'll see if Kyle Cunanan ends up becoming that. Although they'll name a kicker next week, a starting kicker next week. That was one of the things that was communicated by Coach Eckler. So, but even if Cunanan doesn't see the field, he's still been pushing John Hull this whole time. And if John Hull goes down with any of the things that we've seen kickers go down with in the past, you feel pretty confident about him. So I like that. There's a lot to like in special teams right now. Again, if you came away from Coach Eckler's press conference, if you listened to it and you weren't excited about special teams, you must have been listening on mute.
I'm doing this right now. There's wood right here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm knocking on it because I'm gonna give you a specific improvement because I think there's a lot of things that we've heard from Mike Eckler, from Matt Rule, from everybody involved in special teams that they like where things are progressing. You talked about Cunanan, and I think also between John Hull and Tristan Alvano, there is a legitimate competition going on between those three, and it's not a competition of, well, so-and-so's not hitting it, so now the next guy, well, he was hitting a couple that now he's not hitting.
That we know of. That's the part of the thing, though, that, we're all, I guess, I don't know if I fully disagree, but when you get into fall camp, like the hard part is we don't know a lot about that kicker battle to know, okay, is it
by default?
Is it competitive because they're all really good, or is that what they want to project, or what's happened? Like that's it. It still remains an unknown.
From what I'm hearing, I think this is the competition that you need. That whoever comes out, I just feel, call it a gut reaction, hearing the things that I need to hear at this point, not necessarily just by the coaches and coach speak. I think you're going to see a lot more footballs A lot more of the piggy flying through the uprights on a consistent basis.
Here's
in
hoping.
In this makeable range than what we've seen in the past. That consistency that I think is going to be huge. So,
All right, how about ROI on NIL?
Jimmy, I'm going to give you an example because I think it's a great question. The GMs are a big part of this, as Troy Dannon talked about. Let's take a look at some of the bigger additions in the transfer portal for this year. Let's start with Dane Key, Elijah Pritchett, Rocco Spindler, Isaiah Hunter, Williams Winery. If we're hearing any one of those guys that I assume there was a decent amount of money paid for to bring them over out of the transfer portal, if you're hearing even one of those guys is not at least factoring into the too deep, that's a problem. That's where it goes to what Jimmy asks about that return on investment if you're investing and you're not getting snaps out of the guy. At least the way in week 3, things are trending with just those examples I labeled or I laid out there. If those guys are not factoring in the mix, then you got a problem there. But
For sure.
At least the good news is so far they are.
Okay, chiming in, TJ. TJ's got one here that's kind of a longer one, but take out Akron and Houston Christian because TJ is counting those as automatic wins. That leaves 5 power conference games at home. So Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, USC, Iowa. Then there's 5 power conference games that are away from Memorial Stadium. So Cincy, Cincinnati, Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA, and Penn State. Of those 5, do you see more wins at home or away from Memorial? And then TJ says he's on team home, Michigan Northwestern, Michigan State, USC, and Iowa.
No, he says he thinks he sees more wins away.
Away. I'm sorry.
From Memorial Stadium.
Sorry, I put words in your mouth, TJ.
No. And
more than you gave me.
It's so I still count Cincinnati as a home game, but I know in this exercise we can't because it's actually away from Memorial Stadium. I think that this is where I don't necessarily look at where there appears to be a little bit more of the layups because I don't think Nebraska's in a position to have layups anymore. I think you have good opportunities, but I think Maryland is in an identity crisis. I think that's a great opportunity for Nebraska on the road. Minnesota, I think, is extremely tough. I think this is a team that maybe some people are sleeping on with Minnesota, and we know the history between the Gophers and the Huskers. That game being in Minneapolis. It's the Huntington Bank? Yeah, I was going to say TCF Bank. Huntington Bank Stadium. UCLA, I think, is a 50-50 game. Between the travel and UCLA, I think getting better in year 2 under Deshaun Foster, having a very good quarterback as well. I think that's a 50-50 game. Penn State is the toughest game on Nebraska's schedule.
Without a doubt.
So I look at the home slate. Michigan, that's tough. That's going to be tough. But I like where you're getting Michigan. And if Nebraska's off to a good start, that's going to be a very fun environment. Michigan State is a good opportunity. Northwestern is a good opportunity. USC is going to be really interesting, especially where that is. 50-50 game. Iowa, 50-50 game. I actually disagree with TJ. I see more wins coming out of the home slate because if you're going to give me some 50-50 games that exist on both the home and away slate, I'm going to take more of those 50-50 games at home than I will on the road.
Yeah, so I almost feel like this is close to a push. Cincinnati, Maryland, that's in the same category to me as Michigan State, Northwestern, USC, Iowa, Michigan, all 50-50s. Minnesota, that one's going to be really tough.
I think it's 55-45 Minnesota.
People underestimate Minnesota still, and we'll have more stats on them when we do our preview later on in the show. And then Penn State, I agree with you, is a sure loss. UCLA is an intriguing team. I still think that's a team Nebraska should beat on the road. There is that time travel difference, but I think I'm probably with you on the home stuff. Of the games that I think are the toughest on that home slate, it's probably Iowa. And then after that, probably Michigan. I think Iowa's still the toughest game, but there is no like Penn State level opponent on that schedule. Nebraska could easily win all 5 of those home games. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I think I'm close to a push, but pretty much in your camp.
Okay. And then we got
Last one here is from Tony in Denver. And Tony in Denver wants to know what we think about Nebraska's defensive line. He's keeping it broad.
What I think is a defensive line that needs to have more wins than losses in the battles early on. Now, what I mean, I know that's like, what? Word salad there. Okay, against Cincinnati, find more good than bad in trying to stop the run. That group needs to progressively get better as the competition starts to ramp up. They need to go into that Michigan game with confidence, because if you're thinking that this defensive line is going to pick up from where the last one left off in game number 1 and they're just going to be dominant, I think your expectations are a little bit skewed. I think this needs to be a process where I don't doubt the bodies that are up front. It's just all of those guys being together, the communication and all the elements that come with facing different types of offenses, that I think it's going to be a process that if they're feeling confident getting into that Michigan game, that's where you could really see the fruits of that labor, that process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're going to get tested right out of the gate. I think Cincinnati immediately, with a running quarterback and, Dewey Walker from Wisconsin, there's a lot of pieces here that indicates to me this is going to be a heavy run team that's going to go right at that perceived weakness for Nebraska. You can't show it. I mean, you have Elijah Judy back. That is a mature body. Look, it's not Natch, it's not Ty, but you have Elijah Judy, you have Riley Van Poppel in the middle, who looks physically very similar to Nash and Ty. If you look at it, it's almost like the two merged into one person, from the facial hair that looks a lot like Nash's beard.
He's going to throw on glasses every now and then.
The physical makeup. I mean, like all of that. I think that Riley Van Poppel is shaping up to have a very, very big year, bolstered by his redshirt season a year ago. And so if you're getting pushed around by Cincinnati, or give up somewhere north of 175 rushing yards or something like that, that's a major red flag, especially for what you're seeing for the rest of the year and with Michigan coming to Memorial Stadium in September. The other thing that I'm very interested in, can you get to the quarterback with 4? Can you rush 4 and still get to the quarterback? That's something that I feel like Nebraska has been missing for quite a while. Can you do that? And that's maybe somewhere Williams-Nwaneri comes in. So those are my thoughts.
I have a little pushback on the Cincinnati, the emphasis on that, because I do think that there are going to be some big plays in the running game for Cincinnati, because I just generally think that for this defensive line and this front 7 collectively to play 4 quarters of dominant run-stopping football, I think is a little too much to ask out of this group.
I'm not asking for less than 3 yards a carry, but like if they get gashed consistently in this game,
consistently, sure,
I'm
but there's
going to be
some big plays.
Alarmed.
Would you agree there's going to be some big plays, though?
I think there is. Anytime you like a season opener, you're going to have big plays of missed tackles and some of those sort of things. But look, I mean, if you start to show some serious chinks in the armor in the run game against Cincinnati, I just don't know how you match up against Michigan or probably even USC or Iowa.
Yeah, because I know sometimes we will dwell on that of. Remember that the 2 drives they had where they got beat up a lot, and then we'll forget about 8 or 9 drives that they were dominant. So I gotta make sure I will take that over 6 good drives and 5 bad drives. But I know sometimes we'll oh man, remember it's 10 yards here, 15 yards there. If it was one bad drive, it's one bad drive. But I think it's gonna be a process. But I'm encouraged by this group. I definitely.
Here we go. Archie time.
Yes, had a really good conversation that Grant had with Archie Wilson that we wanted to play for you right now. Give it a listen and look.
Folks, welcome again to Huskers All Access, brought to you by Access Bank. My name is Grant Hansen, Access Bank, here for a reason, and I'm joined here by Nebraska punter Archie Wilson. Archie, welcome to Nebraska. What's the biggest difference for you between your home country in Australia and then here in Nebraska?
Well, most of the differences that have been happening in my life lately, I wouldn't say necessarily to do with being in a different country. I think that, coming to a program like this and, all that, the long days of football, and it's a different experience altogether. But other than the random words that I say that are completely different, and I'll say some words and people are like, what does that even mean?
What are some examples of those?
There's a lot of them. Let me try and think of one. This is bad. I'm starting to think. I'm not sure if I can say a lot of them.
Well, if you can think of one that you can say, if there is one you can say, just blurt it out halfway through. But so tell me about Coach Eckler, your relationship with him. When did that start, and how did that bring you here?
Yeah, I mean, a few months ago I started to talk to him. He called. I'd heard about this sort of opportunity, and then got a phone call from a FaceTime for a random American number. I'm like, okay, let's just see who this is. And they just see Coach Eck saying, hey, Arch, what's up, mate? And I'm like, he didn't say mate. That was just my instincts kicking in there. But Yeah, he's awesome, and I feel so comfortable being with him. Like, there's a lot of things to go through and learn, and he's never gonna be annoyed at you if you stuff up or something. He's always making sure that we're getting better and not just getting down ourselves. And you see him in the hallway, and he's the most energetic guy in the room. Brings up everyone's spirits, and he's just a great person to be around.
Tell me about the 33, 33, 34 phrase that he used about just the snap, hold, kick, all that percentage. I don't know if it totally translates to punting, but that sort of mentality and some of the coaching style, I guess, principles that Coach Eckler has.
Yeah, well, on the kicking side of things, I mean, a lot of people might see it and just be like, oh, that kicker has missed that. But I guess as a special teams unit, we're making sure that there's 11 people on the field. It's not just one person doing the job. So when it comes to the field goals, the 33% on the snap, the 33 on the hold, and the 34 on the kick. And I guess you could translate to punting. I mean, if the snap's got to be good, our front line has to be good, our shield's got to make sure they're doing their job, and then I've also got to do my job together. So it's not just me punting, it's not just the kicker kicking, it's a whole team that goes towards it. So I can't take all the credit for any good punts, and it means that the whole team has to do their job.
I think there's a lot of Americans who have heard recently a lot about Pro Kick, but maybe hadn't before. So can you give us some perspective on how Pro Kick is perceived, where you're from, the lineage it has, and sort of the goals that you had in mind when you said, this is where I want to be, this is where I want to learn how to be good at this?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, Pro Kick is up there with the greatest things that have happened to me in my life. Like, it genuinely changes what you're doing with your life. Look, you kind of sign up there with a little bit of what's going to happen here, and then pretty early on they give you feedback as like where you sit, what they think they could do with you, and pretty early on they were like, yeah, like we're going to get you to a pretty good school, and then you just keep training and keep waiting, keep creating chances to get an opportunity, and eventually when they think that you're ready, they'll set you up with a school, and then that's what happened to me, and now I'm here at Nebraska, and then happens to hundreds of other people as well. They really changed lives, and it's I cannot say one bad thing about the program.
A couple more for you here, Archie. Just walk me through the emotions or your anticipation right now as you're maybe 2 weeks, a little more than that, away from stepping out, playing your first American football game in the home of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm filled with excitement. I'm seeing there's a countdown in our facility everywhere, and I'm just seeing the days ticking down. I'm like, okay, I think it's 16 days now. I got 16 days left to keep working, and then 16 days until it's time to go. And I could be nervous. I could be nervous if I wanted to, but I'm just viewing it as exciting. I'm just going to go out there and make sure I'm enjoying it, but also do my job as best as I can. Yeah, I mean, it's been the day in the calendar since I found out I was coming here, making sure I get to that first game with as best prepared as I can, and I'm just ready to go out there and perform.
Last one here for you, Archie. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Piano Man, because that's been probably the question you've been asked the most today. But walk me through that story, singing that song in the meetings. Do you have any other songs that you can sing?
Well, I didn't think that well, in our team meetings, all the freshmen and new staff members, one of them will go each meeting. It's just like a way to test your confidence and get out there and show yourself to the group. And I went out, I just settled on Piano Man. I know the words, and I was like, I'm going to go up there and give it my all. It was a bit of a rough start and hit a high note, and I was like, all right, let's get rolling here. And the crowd got into it, and it was awesome. I've never really considered myself the most great vocalist, but apparently now I've got to start taking it somewhere. I
know. Well, now you have a whole state and probably plenty of Husker fans beyond throughout the United States that are very familiar with you and singing Piano Man, among other things. So Archie Wilson here with us for Huskers All Access, presented by Access Bank. I'm Grant Hansen saying so long, and we'll talk to you again next time.
You somehow could not get him to sing the song, Grant.
I didn't ask him to.
Major failure.
I didn't ask him to.
I
also didn't ask him, and we were talking about this while we were walking away, about kicking with
the other
legs.
foot. Yeah.
I don't think that's the only time we're going to talk to Archie Wilson this year. Hopefully not, for his sake, that he performs well enough that we see him again.
That was good stuff, though. Really, really good stuff there with Archie Wilson. I want to get into our opponent preview as we wrap things up here on the Husker Huddle. So we're now on the part of the schedule that I think is going to be a huge, huge swing point of this season. And we
Late
are
October.
Minnesota, Northwestern, and USC. So we'll start with Minnesota, that game that will be at Huntington Bank Stadium. It's a Friday night game. Quick turnaround on that one. Minnesota, their 2025 win total 6.5, and the money is on the over. People think that Minnesota will have at least a 7-win season. Look, Grant, I think people can say what they will about PJ Fleck. I go all the way back to 2020 in the COVID year where they brought in barely a team where they could have easily said, sorry, between injuries and COVID, we can't play, because that kept happening all year throughout college football. He brought in an absolute mash unit, and they outcompeted that Scott Frost-led team. One
of the most embarrassing losses of the Frost era.
And I think in return, also one of the more impressive coaching jobs by PJ Fleck. And he's continued to have Nebraska's number. What I like about this Minnesota team this year, Darius Taylor is a fantastic running back. And I think Drake Lindsey, a lot of good things being said about the redshirt freshman quarterback that they have leading the way. With Brosmer out, I think this Minnesota team, if their offensive line, now they replaced 3 starters, that's a big part of this. If that offensive line, kind of like what I said about Michigan last week, that offensive line comes together early on, I see them hitting the over. I think this is a Minnesota team, though, people are sleeping on it a little bit.
No doubt.
I'm not trying to say they're a 9-win team or a 10-win team, but I definitely think they are hitting the over at 6.5.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Hammer the over there on 6.5 wins this year. 8-5 last year. That was the third time in the last 4 seasons that a PJ Fleck led team at Minnesota had got at or above 8 wins. There's only 7 other college football coaches in the entirety of the sport that have the same number of 9 seasons at the same gig with more than 60% of their games won. PJ Fleck, of course, is sitting actually at 59.8%. But he's incredible. You have Darius Taylor back. That's what you always want to know with Minnesota. Who's running the football? Who's the running back there? 986 rushing yards last year, 10 touchdowns. And he'll partner with Cam Davis as well, who's a 7th-year transfer from Washington, over 500 rushing yards in 2022 for him. So there's a lot of good pieces there and a lot of things to like for Minnesota. If you're a Minnesota fan, if you're a Nebraska fan, that's a game worth feeling nervous about.
Yes. Again, quick turnaround, that Friday night game out there in Minneapolis. All right, Northwestern, it was weird, wasn't it, Grant? We did not have a Nebraska-Northwestern game last year.
Sad.
It was
not really.
Kind of sad.
But kind of.
David Braun now in his 3rd season. I had a lot of respect for what he had to come into after that whole Pat Fitzgerald fiasco at Northwestern. Yep. He's also a defensive-minded guy. We know that. The way that they finished that season 2 years ago was impressive. Last year, not as good in the divisionless Big Ten, and we knew Northwestern could be a casualty. 3.5 is the projected win total for 2025. Money also on the over for this one, and I'm also going to see the over. Now, I think this is a Northwestern team that with running another
it's pretty
team
much impossible to hit the under on that.
Well,
it's Northwestern,
teams that can do that. But Cam Porter, I swear he's been there since 2018.
It feels that way.
I know he's been injured a lot too, but Preston Stone, the SMU transfer quarterback, coming in. And then here's a name that people may or may not remember, Karlaftis. Remember George Karlaftis? Younger brother Yanni, who was at Purdue, transfers over to Northwestern, so you get maybe a little bit of help on that defensive front as well. I think this Northwestern team is still miles behind where they have been, where they've been that really cool Big Ten story, but I do think they hit the over. I think this is probably a 5-win team.
4-8 a year ago. Look, 14 or fewer points 6 times last year. That's the second least. They became the second least efficient passing team in all of college football. It was an embarrassment on the offensive side, but you bring in a new offensive coordinator in Zach it's either Lujan or Lujan, that's my bad for not knowing, out of SDSU, national champion there in the FCS level. You bring in the receiver from that team, 70 catches, 12 touchdown season for Griffin Wild. So there's some pieces there that you like, and you say, okay, how does that transfer up to the FBS level? I guess we'll find out. But I think they'll be better than a year ago as well. And that's a game that, again, Nebraska should win that game. I feel like if you're Nebraska, you should almost always assume you're going to beat Northwestern. And if you can't assume that, as it has been the case at times, I think Nebraska's back in that territory where you can mark Northwestern down as a win. But this is a team that could be fascinating to watch as we sit back and enjoy 2025.
And remember, Northwestern, a lot of things going on there. The new stadium that'll be opening in the coming years.
Yeah.
So David Braun needs to.
He's got it going.
He needs to re-solidify himself that he is the answer as they go forward too. This is a big year. Last year wasn't great. First year, I think people were pleasantly surprised. So this will be an interesting year for that. USC, speaking of interesting years and coaches, that maybe there's some mixed reaction and a lot of parallels with how people look at the Nebraska football program. An identical 2025 win-loss projection. The over-under is at 7.5. The money is on the over at minus 185 right now for USC to hit that over. And Grant, this is a team, I say the parallels of Nebraska because I think a lot of people want to see this team and kind of feel good about seeing this team make a jump forward. But there's a little bit of that reluctance because they've seen enough evidence where certain teams that look like they were on the come did not achieve. They did not perform. In fact, underperformed. And so whether that's coaching, whether that's injuries, a lot of different factors play into it. Make no mistake about this. USC is extremely talented. We know that. We saw that quarterback a year ago too. And I just think that this is a USC team. This game, I think, is fascinating being in Lincoln as late as it is. But I also think this is a USC team that if they don't hit that over, Lincoln Riley questions start to really ramp up out there in Southern California.
You know, I can't remember who we were talking. I was talking to somebody about this. Just that the thought was basically in this new era of college football, it's going to be harder and harder to buy out coaches. So what we've seen in terms of the balloon in the market, in terms of coaching your Jimbo Fishers, all those sorts of buyouts, you're going to see less and less of that in the rev share era. I think that maybe comes into play and potentially saves Lincoln Riley if this goes south. But I think a lot of people look at this game on the USC side, looking at Nebraska, going into Nebraska in November as sort of, this is where you decide if this is a good season or not. This could be where the season totally turns for USC. And in some ways for Nebraska, it's pretty similar. And very similar to where it was a year ago when Nebraska went out there. If you're Nebraska, of course, you're hoping for cold weather, all that jazz. Jaden Maiava back at quarterback. He's going to be really, really good. Again, he's got great receivers to throw to. What else has changed with USC or Lincoln Riley-led teams? This is a team that I question on the defensive side. They still have answers to come up with when it comes to the physicality, and you wonder, does it fit in the Big Ten? Can Lincoln Riley get this team there on that side of things and shift the national perception with this season? I'm fascinated to watch it play out.
And bring up Maiava because there's another guy that, remember, he started banged up, and then you also had a different starter. Maiava comes in the Nebraska game and looked pretty good and really played well from that point on. But this is a guy that they really like, and this is where Lincoln Riley does his best work. Can Maiava be one of those guys in that Lincoln Riley Rolodex of quarterbacks that have been developed and go on to the next level? So I think that I'm with you, though. That game in Lincoln could be very fascinating as far as what it means for both of those teams and how people perceive them on a national level, because we know both have a major national brand. So good stuff there. All right. That's all the time we have here on the Husker Huddle. Also want to encourage you to get those emails in for our mailbag. Great questions this week. If you want to get a question into us, be sure to hit us up, huskerhuddle@myboomerradio.com. When we join you next week, it's game week, baby. We'll be out of fall camp, and we'll be entering
game week. We'll be the day before Aer Lingus, too. I mean, that'll be fun.
College football's here.
Farmageddon, but in Ireland.
So weird.
On brand, though. Potatoes.
Why does that have to be in Ireland?
Don't ask me that question.
I'm sure there are people in Manhattan and Ames are very upset about that.
Hey, give us a like, subscribe to the Performance Podcast YouTube page, and give us a review on Spotify and Apple or wherever you get your podcasts.
For Grant Hansen, I'm Nick Hanley. You've been watching and listening to the Husker Huddle. Appreciate you doing that. Until next time, we'll talk to you.